Very good afternoon, ladies and gentlemen, wherever you're joining us from. Welcome, welcome, welcome once again to another exciting webinar session organized by the Employment Law Committee of the East Africa Law Society. My name is Gabriel Achaye, and I am honored to be here with you this afternoon to listen in and learn in a discussion that is going to delve and explore the topic of AI and employee privacy, navigating implications of data privacy and AI on employee-employer relations. Now, most of you, or if not, all of you who are in the employment spaces know that AI is making very huge strides in the employment industry. It's disrupting and revolutionizing the industry, as you all know it. And this afternoon, we have an esteemed panel of presenters who have a very rich portfolio in employment and AI related issues. But before we go there, ladies and gentlemen, it's now my profound honor to introduce our moderator for the session. Our moderator is Miss Elizabeth Musikali. Miss Musikali is a partner at Dr. Musikali Advocates LLP. She also doubles as the chairperson of the ELS Corporate Law Committee, and she is a lecturer of law. She is very passionate about issues corporate law and has built quite a wealth of expertise in that area. So, Elizabeth, we are profoundly honored and exceedingly humbled to host you this afternoon, and I will hand it over to you now to blow us away for the next 2 hours. We are all yours.
Right. Thank you. Thank you very much, Gabriel. I'll just do a brief introduction and then as the rest join in. But thank you so much for joining us today. We have 4 panelists with us today. We're going to be discussing the topic of AI and employee privacy, and in particular, navigating the implications of data privacy and AI on employee-employer relations. And just to introduce the entire discussion, we know that AI is revolutionizing the workplace and enabling employers to leverage AI-powered tools for making of crucial decisions, whether it's regarding hiring, termination, compensation, and other employment aspects. And while AI brings the potential for enhanced efficiency and productivity, it also raises legal concerns, particularly in relation to discrimination in the workplace. So in today's rapidly evolving work environment, the increasing use of algorithmic decision-making tools is transforming how employers select and evaluate employees, monitor performance, and determining compensation and promotions. And the integration of AI tools in HR and management offers significant benefits such as increased efficiency and objectivity. However, together with these benefits comes significant challenges, particularly concerning the legal issues which we'll be discussing today in relation to labor rights and equal employment opportunities for all persons seeking employment. And furthermore, there's little regard that's given to data and data protection requirements. So in this webinar session, we'll have discussions evolving around the data protection frameworks in East Africa and generally around the world that surround the use of AI platforms, particularly in employment, and the key legal considerations that employers should be aware of when using AI technologies in recruitment and employment. So our first speaker for today is Mr. Patson Arinaitwe, who is a senior partner at Signum Advocates. He's a Ugandan and UK trained lawyer with expertise and experience in projects and infrastructure, dispute resolution, and employment and pensions practices. And he has advised several national, international clients on many matters, especially including in the field of banking and finance, employment, pensions, commercial disputes, and all of that. But also, in particularly in the employment space, he has been at the forefront of guiding the firm's corporate clients on their obligations under the Ugandan labor laws. He frequently also works with boards, general and in-house counsel, human resource departments, directly with operation in handling issues related to employment relations, legal and regulatory compliance, structuring of pensions, retirement benefit schemes, as well as review and formulation of human resource manuals and policies. Welcome, Mr. Arinaitwe. You'll be our first panelist for today. And what you're going to be discussing is the adoption of AI and trends in the employment space. And just as we get into it, what is AI and what are the current trends in the adoption of AI in the workplace?
Thank you, Elizabeth, for having me this afternoon, and the East African Law Society at large. I'm privileged to be part of this conversation that is quite timely, that affects our practice as lawyers, that affects the workspaces, probably where we are, either you're an employee or you are an employer, or you interact so much with the human capital. So it's a timely discussion for us, and doesn't matter really the nature of practice, whether you are in disputes, whether you are in projects, or whatever area of the law you are likely to interface with this topic. I'm not yet seen as a lawyer. I'm in transit, just landing a couple of hours in UK. So my address code may not be the lawyer one that we're used to, especially in Uganda. AI and what are the current trends? So we're talking about artificial intelligence, using computer, using machines to make or stimulate human decisions and probably do tasks that were traditionally made for human beings. And we've seen a lot of penetration. We cannot talk of artificial intelligence without talking about digital penetration and technology in our workspaces. And whether we know it or not, I think each and every workspace now, whether small or big, has had an impact or has, in a way, in one or the other, adopted artificial intelligence in the workspace. So the trend may not be placed in 2 or 3 years backwards, but as long as we're talking about digitalization of workspaces, we can talk about penetration of artificial intelligence. And of course, depending on the jurisdiction where you are, we've seen different levels of penetration. And I think currently, when we talk of global statistics now, over 40% of the HR practices are augmented by artificial intelligence. Meaning now the human capital decisions, whether on how we do our work, or whether in terms of hiring, or whether it's about how we process our work, AI is part of us. But maybe the right I would want to put is that in the word artificial intelligence, there's a word artificial. So it's still artificial, but we'll see how it has affected our workspaces. A good example is that in the HR space, so other than being a lawyer, I'm a human resource practitioner and a member of the Human Resource Managers Association of Uganda. And a lot of our discussion on those platforms, we talk about what we call, people analytics. So from the hiring point of view now, there's a lot of what we call data-driven analytics. Whether from the hiring, there's a lot of input now in as far as artificial intelligence is concerned. In Uganda now, if anyone advertised for a job, I can guarantee you that probably you'll receive more than 500 applications with CVs. Now you can imagine the HR department combing through over 500 CVs, shortlist probably 10 people where you can be able to get one candidate or 2. So quite a number of organizations now are using artificial intelligence in doing a screening of CVs, ensuring that they get the right candidates in terms of qualifications, to be able to comb through all that administrative work that might come with the analysis of 500 or even sometimes 1,000 applications, at least 10 or 15. So quite a number of organizations now do that in terms of screening. As you might be aware now, people are even phasing out hard copy applications. Please, go on our website, send in your CV, your application, and documents. Part of it is to ensure that the AI can pick that information and be able to screen it for the first time before the human face comes in. if at all there'll be that stage anyway. In some organizations, it's not there anymore. Because sometimes the human face comes with quite lots of biases, as we might see later. In Uganda, it's very easy to know where somebody comes from by name. So I can choose where I see a Wana Renaito, I know where they come from. So what AI might do is to ensure that as long as the algorithm has done very well, to do the first screening. So that's part of it. The other component of AI I've seen that has taken over is on performance management. Performance management is a big deal now, I think, in the region in terms of assessment. So you can imagine the HR department, you are pretending over 2,000 employees, and you're going through a performance management cycle. So if part of the processes are not automated, you might find it very difficult in terms of dealing with promotions. Sometimes payment of bonuses are based on performance, salary increments are based on performance, and a lot has to be done in a very short period of time. So we've seen current trends where now artificial intelligence is taking over the first automation of performance management. And they're able to easily pick information from SharePoints, from emails, from reports, from the supervisors, peer reviews, and to be able to analyze that data in the shortest time possible so that people leaders now can deal with information that has been generated. And if there's any interaction that is required now, has data that can back that up. That helps a lot. And the last bit in terms of AI is maybe on the remote side is even as we deal with exit, especially separation. I can be able now to be able to determine people's patterns based on their social media posts. I understand now the AI can be able to analyze somebody's intelligence or human behavior based on their postings, Facebook, Twitter, Instagram, and they know in terms of fit in the organization whether this person is a culture fit, or not. Beyond automating now most of the processes, that happens quite a lot. So for now, it's not a question of whether we need artificial intelligence in a workplace or not. The question is now, how do we accommodate it to survive? And I think globally now we've seen statistics where jobs are being phased out. In the finance sector, we've seen now most of the branches in the banks being closed because most of the processes are now being automated to increase customer experience. Within the law firms now, a contract can be drafted very fast. Maybe now you no longer need many interns and first-year associates because a lot can be done by artificial intelligence. So automating processes and the routine work is something now on a small scale, especially on the continent, has taken up. But in other developed nations now, that is fully integrated with artificial intelligence. Yeah.
Right. Thank you very much, Mr. Arenaitwe, for that. That was a good introduction. And now, because you've talked a bit about the traditional roles and responsibilities that have been transformed by AI, maybe you can just add a bit more on that, but combine it together with the benefits that AI gives to employers when they integrate such technology within the workplace. For example, we've talked about performance monitoring tools, all of that. So what is the benefit of doing this? What is the benefit for an employer to integrate this within the workspace? You're muted.
Yeah, thank you, Elizabeth, for that. Of course, when you talk of artificial intelligence, then we're also dealing with the fact that traditional job roles and responsibilities will fundamentally be affected significantly. And when we speak from our region like East Africa, sometimes we think that AI is for the future. So we still have 10, 15 years to go. Not at all. Because when you analyze the level of AI penetration at workplace, it's actually at a very fast rate. Only that it's penetrating workplace at a frequency and speed that staff are unaware of and comes in bits and pieces. For instance, now, especially in law firms now, legal research has been heavily worked on by AI. If you ask me a question, I don't need to go to the library because I have ChatGPT. It will be my first point of reference. We can talk of the ethical issues later and probably the mistakes and errors, but right now artificial intelligence is helping legal research much better. So if you're a senior lawyer in a law firm, you may not probably need that first year associate to do your first research, prepare the memorandum, and then you have to go and ask a hard copy decision made in 1980, because technology now can be able to enable that. Secondly, now we have a lot of document review. For those in the project space, you know that sometimes, contracting documents are quite voluminous. You're talking about, 300 pages, 200 pages, and maybe your concern is reviewing particularly clauses on indemnities and limitation of liability. You plug in AI, it's able to extract that, for you, probably redraft, as well as even make reference to the decisions that have interpreted such clauses previously. That maybe would have been, work of over 5 senior lawyers to do that. So document reviews now has been made easy, with AI, and with, developed jurisdictions, it's actually more advanced. The other is on, for instance, when we talk of the traditional roles in finance, and accounting. I know most of our jurisdictions, for instance, now deal with anti-money laundering and fraud detection. Now we needed a huge department, every organization, especially in the finance sector, on cybersecurity, on anti-money laundering division to ensure that you detect that. Right now, you are able to have systems that can monitor and be able to pick suspicious transactions in real time. You don't need 5 accountants, for instance, who look at every transaction above $10,000. This is suspicious, flag it. But you have a system now that can do it in real time, so that you don't have to have so many people in a department to do that. So they're able to monitor and report such in real time. And you can imagine how that helps to rationalize, especially the finance sector, the insurance, including law firms, where actually ought to have, such, concerns. The other is, for instance, on financial planning and analysis. And we've seen that now the traditional finance department growing smaller and smaller. You needed an accountant, you needed an auditor, a finance manager, and part of the KPIs of the finance manager was to do forecast, to do budgeting, to ensure that all that can be done, quite well. So now with the kind of technology, then you are able now to devise means to have AI that can do your forecast, financial performance. All you need is to feed in the data. As a business, it will tell you how far you're doing and how much do you need to do in as far as the future is concerned. So we will see finance departments reducing. Where you had 5, 10 people, a lot is being done now by AI. And of course, from the traditional employment now, the employee engagement is getting better. Why? Because you can be able to detect behavior changes. You are able to have customized personal training and development needs. These days, you need to say, we need CLE points, and even if you're a commercial lawyer, but there's a training on divorce, you are there, depending on the size of the organization. But with AI now, you can actually have personalized trainings, including online, that are offered without having to spend even money. And that helps in terms of talent development a lot at workplace. Although, of course, it takes out the human element. I can't now go and discuss with HR. I will send an email, or depending on what you're doing and performance evaluation, the system will tell you probably your strengths are in this area. your areas of improvement are in these areas, probably you need to do that training. And taking out the human element in the workspace is another challenge we can talk about, but it's what is affecting some of these traditional roles. If you go to healthcare now, the diagnosis now is being done by AI. So you note that all those are critical concerns, but also very good benefits that come with it. So when you do automation of the mundane work, then your staff can be able to concentrate on tasks that are engaging, tasks that are fulfilling, that create job satisfaction. When you're dealing with the Gen Zs of this world now, job satisfaction is a big deal. So if you do routine work, today you're drafting a mortgage, tomorrow you draft a mortgage, the next day you're drafting a mortgage, a Gen Z will quietly quit the workplace. They're bored. So when you do AI and you're able to take out routine work, repetitive work, and you leave out work that is stimulating for especially the later millennials and the Gen Zs, then you create more job satisfaction at workplace. And that leads into talent retention. It's no longer about the paycheck now. It's also about, am I happy at workplace? And repetitive work has never generated happiness to anyone. Yeah, so, and of course, from the bottom line point of view, if I'm a business leader and I'm able to automate some of the processes, it means that productivity is high and the bottom line is better than it should be. Yeah.
Yes, thank you. Thank you for that. And now that you've talked about job satisfaction amongst employees, maybe in 2 minutes, can you tell us how employees can now leverage on AI? We now know how employers can use AI, but what about employees?
Yeah, of course, employees, part of the benefits I've talked about from the business point of view or from the organizational point of view would certainly benefit the employee. You can imagine a traditional employee. When I started as an associate in a law firm, internet was there, but there wasn't much. So I needed to go to the High Court library, pick the High Court bulletin 1970 to do research for my bosses at the time. Or I needed to move to a university library to pick that hard copy book to do research. But for now, even when you talk of pastors now, the sermons can be generated by AI. I need to discuss about provision from the biblical sense. All I need is to tell my AI to generate a sermon of 1 hour, and maybe I can proofread and see. So from the employee point of view, there's efficiency that can be generated with the use of AI. But also, conversely, empathy is being taken out, meaning for an employee who is data-driven, they are likely to have efficiency created at work. And you can no longer do your 8-5. If I'm efficient, I have AI that can enable my work, I can automate my routine, then I'm able to do my 2-3 hours and I go. Right now, if you're using Microsoft Teams, if you've not responded to an email, it will alert you, would you want to respond to this email? It's now 2 days. So you can imagine now some of the errors that used to happen shouldn't be. You can be able to schedule your meetings using AI and the reminders. I'm wondering right now whether we even need personal assistants when AI can actually be your personal assistant. Scheduling meetings, reminding you to respond to emails, including giving you the first draft email that is happening, or the first draft document. If I need a contract, I no longer have to go with a blank page and could get something from the blue when you have AI that can be able to give you the first draft to work with. Meaning now there should be less human error where some of the basics that we struggle with can be able to be picked from AI. Yeah.
Yes, thank you for that. Now, the last bit that we'll be talking about, maybe we can combine these two areas. Maybe in 3 minutes, can we talk about the challenges and risks associated with the increase in the use of AI in employment? You touched on a bit of that, but also the ethical considerations that will arise from the use of AI in employment decisions.
Yeah. Thank you, Elizabeth. Of course, I note that a lot of discussions with AI currently, especially from the legal point of view, we tend to focus more on the risks. And I think sometimes that has frustrated the development and the penetration of AI at workplace in a way that it can frustrate its growth without looking at the benefits. But it's important to appreciate the fact that when you have AI at workplace, there's a risk of job displacement. I think that has already happened in some jurisdictions. Meaning if you're trained for particular routine work, definitely that will be taken away. That because of automation, either you'll have skills mismatch as an employee, or you will have to be able to find new skills. Otherwise, those skills will be obsolete. That's what AI is doing, and it's a risk that is happening. Meaning there has to be reskilling, retooling, or learning and unlearning to ensure that every person is up to task with AI. And of course, the other is in regard to bias issues. So while AI sometimes displaces bias, there's also another bias that is being created as a result of using AI. What AI is doing, for instance, in the hiring space, is the fact that it uses historical data. And if algorithms are not prepared very well or audited very well to remove those biases, they will remain. If I'm a one Aranito from Western Uganda, and the algorithm set is to hire people with the name that starts with A. I don't know about in Kenya and Tanzania and Rwanda, but in Uganda, chances are that somebody with an A name, they'll be from Western Uganda. So if the previous data analyzed is to hire everyone with an A, so you might have discrimination that is not intended. So there's some existing biases that can actually be perpetuated by AI itself. Of course, the other, privacy concerns, whether it's at the hiring stage or performance management, AI relies so much on data collected. And because of that extensive data that is provided, you do not know how far, for instance, organization will go in terms of protecting personal data. So there's a danger of the breaches, privacy breaches at a personal level. And in Uganda, we have actually seen some suits now, not on image rights anymore, but now on data protection concerns. The other, of course, is surveillance. And like I said, because AI relies so much on data collected, it means employees at workplaces will have to be monitored, not only on phone, on emails, on systems that are set up as workspaces. And that monitoring can't be nice. From the mental health point of view, knowing that you are being monitored that way, it could create as well privacy concerns. The other, of course, is security risks. Cybersecurity is of great concern. And most of these AI systems are really vulnerable to cyber attacks and hacking. And because data is gold, if I know a particular organization has already done employment benefits survey, why should I go back into the market if I can hack into the system and get that survey? So there's prone to hacking to be able to get data. If I want to know customer experience, but I know my competitor has already done that customer satisfaction survey, why can't I hack it? Or as an employee, why can't I sell it for a killing, since data is gold? So you have data privacy concerns, you have cybersecurity concerns that come with AI, because now information is being concentrated. But also then, how do you manage human and AI interaction at a workspace. How is that managed? You note that a lot of penetration of AI, especially in Uganda, happened during lockdown. Uganda had the longest lockdown in the world, over 2 years. So many people stayed home, and organizations that were not even up in technology were able to enhance that. But also now statistics demonstrate that there was a lot of mental health issues during that time, especially in relation to work. And after that, we witnessed, not only in Uganda, but globally, what we call the Great Resignation. Performance interact Microsoft Teams. Performance review, you don't have to meet your supervisor. Please feed in the data on the system, which will be analyzed, and you have instant feedback. So the human AI interaction that has taken away the sympathy. The reason why I'm not performing could be I have a challenge, a personal challenge. And AI will not have sympathy for you. It doesn't have empathy at workplace. And that's a challenge that that is happening because of taking away the risk. The other, of course, is that social psychological impact, which is related as well to mental health. And of course, that requires that you must have a multifaceted approach in terms of dealing with those issues. Because taking out the human element in the interaction at workplace, you are bringing artificiality at workplace, where sometimes that human touch, that empathy is necessary to boost productivity, is necessary to deal with performance issues, is necessary to motivate. And AI takes that away, and we all have to deal with with data. Yeah.
Right. Thank you very much, Mr. Arinaitwe. Now, our last question, especially because you talked about the fact that a lot of the mundane tasks in the workplace are now being taken over by AI. How, on the side of educational institutions, how can we prepare students for the marketplace now, the job space now? As a HR practitioner, what kind of tips can you give us as educational institutions in order to prepare the future workers? Maybe in 2 minutes, so that because time is not really on our side. Thank you.
Yeah, thank you, Elizabeth, for for that, and also for bringing in the educational element. There's a time when we said the future is female. And that's the time when gender issue was at the core of the discussion in the employment space. But I think now the future is AI. And if you're preparing students for the future workplace that has changed fundamentally, then AI has to be part and parcel of the education. And I think most of the education institutions are already embracing it. To say a grade 3 student should be able now to handle an interface with a facilitator on Microsoft Teams. Coding is becoming a big issue. Knowing that collecting data, you must use all AI avenues becomes a critical aspect. So I think now every education institutions ought to have AI. The challenge is most education institutions, when they talk of AI, what comes to mind is only robotics and coding. But AI is beyond that. It's in the mannerism, is in terms of preparing work, is in terms of schedules, is in terms of preparing tasks, whether they can be able to embrace technology in its fullest in their day-to-day learning, so that when they get to the workplace, it's not a culture shock, but it's part and parcel of how they've been wired to work, better. But more importantly, also addressing the ethical concerns that come with it, but also knowing that now students that are innovative are the future as well. But also knowing that the skill sets that are required in future may not be the skill sets now. So the education institutions now must embrace not only technology, but developing skill sets and pushing the students to be innovative in such a way that when their skills become obsolete at a given point in time because of technological innovation, they continue to be relevant for the future of work. And that can only start at the school level. Yeah. I thank you, Elizabeth. Yeah.
Thank you very much for that very good introduction. Now, we're going to get into the legal aspect of it, the legal challenges, and how employers can navigate, or what considerations they can make while navigating the legal challenges while employing AI in the workspace. And our next speaker is Ms. Irene Kashindi, who is a partner at Munyao Mudhama and Kashindi, with over 10 years experience as a practicing advocate. And she has a wealth of experience in commercial and civil litigation, as well as arbitration. And she has a significant and distinguished experience in employment and labor relation matters. As well, she has been ranked as, she has been top ranked by the reputable Chambers and Partners Global Guide in 2017 and 2018 in this practice area, where she was described as one of the most prominent employment lawyers in Kenya. And she's informed, professional, and proactive. And she's also been recognized by Legal 500, which notes her as recommended for employment disputes. She holds a Bachelor of Laws from University of Nairobi, a postgraduate diploma in law from the Kenya School of Law, and a master's degree in financial services laws. Karibu, Ms. Kashindi. Kindly take us through the next session.
Thank you so much, Elizabeth, for that introduction. I have a presentation which I'll take about maybe 20 or so minutes. Do not be worried when you see it long, but I will skip some of the things that our first presenter has ably, Patson has ably introduced us on, because some of our topics were overarching. And I will go straight to my presentation. I'll come and talk about my book at the end. So this is my presentation. I'll just talk about a bit of some introduction. I'll not repeat what Mr. Patson had said about AI and generative AI, which is an aspect of AI generally, and the revolution of the work AI at the workspace, both from the use from an employer's perspective, but also from an employee's perspective. And then I will put more emphasis on the risks and implications and challenges and legal risk and how to navigate them. And then I will finish by talking about how does AI outlook look like going forward not even going forward, currently in the current world of work, and also the future of work, and legislative interventions that are happening across the globe. I'll mention those towards the end. I think Patson had already mentioned what is really AI. I think I'm imagining if you are joining this platform, you definitely understand what AI is, but just from a basic understanding is that it's a use of a computer technology to simulate human intelligence. So there's the intelligence part, but it's simulating the human intelligence and rational decision making. So it's not fully human, but some aspect of it are simulating what a human being would think about or what they would do. That is really a basic understanding of AI. And an aspect of it then is generative AI. And the best example is really OpenAI or ChatGPT that Patson had mentioned a lot, which then is used to generate, content, information. And I mean, I'm imagining all of us have used ChatGPT, and that is a very good example of OpenAI. So that generative AI, so that when they launch this product of theirs in November 2022 onwards, I think there's been a lot of buzz and talk about AI, use of generative AI in the workspace, both from, now from an employer's or an employee's perspective. So what does this revolution look like? I think Patson has already mentioned selection and recruitment. He's talked about that. Workforce management. He's talked about that. Employee record keeping. So that is, of course, enhancing efficiency. So employee record keeping, especially in a very large workforce, that is it's a good benefit of AI. Performance monitoring, I think he's talked about that. But I think that later I'll talk about issues to do with, surveillance. Is there over surveillance or risks that come with surveillance when, an employer is using AI to monitor performance or enhance productivity or tracking, then what does that look like from a data protection perspective, but also generally from a legal perspective in a general sense. So what do employees use AI? So from an output perspective, so automating repeated tasks, I think Patson talked about that. Data analytics, enhancing creativity and content creation. I think the Gen Zs have done very well here, but I think not just Gen Zs, but across the workforce, really, we're talking about creativity and just as a side note, in Kenya we had some what do they call protests yesterday, and yesterday and I think today, the day before yesterday, and Gen Zs were the ones leading it, and how it is that they put it together was just sharing it on TikTok and what it is they're planning and what they're doing. It has been a bit of a discussion there, and it has to do with technological advances and AI use in our different workspaces. So, but it has come with good bags. I mean, bags of goodies, but also there are also challenges that I'll mention, that it's improved efficiency, enhanced performance. But then now I take a deep dive on then what are these legal challenges? That as much as AI has revolutionized the workspace in terms of the employers using sort of generative AI, and employees in the work output, but also in the HR processes, we have to think about what is the implication from a data protection perspective. And as much as this transformation has come, then we talk about how is this being shaped? And we talk about employee monitoring, automated decision making. I think it's a big deal from a data protection perspective. I'll talk about it. Impact assessment, the requirements to conduct impact assessment when using this technological platform, enforcing the employee data rights from a data protection perspective, enforcing respect for principles of data protection. I can comfortably talk about Kenya data protection. I'll talk about it later, which mirrors GDPR and compliance of these data protection principles from an employment perspective when we're talking about AI, and also implementing technological organizational measures, what we usually call in the data protection perspective, data protection by design and default. I'll mention a bit that later when I talk about principles and other key issues from a data protection perspective. Monitoring, I think we've talked about employee monitoring using AI, video monitoring, audio monitoring, covert monitoring. When I was just preparing for this training, I read through somewhere where that there's an app that actually monitors, I think in some country, that monitors employees when they're doing work, for example, customer care, such that it is so real time, such that if a customer calls and the customer care executive is receiving the call, AI is able to listen and sort of guide what responses to give. I'm imagining even maybe it's already happening in East Africa. I just don't know which entity would be doing that, but it monitors and gives real-time feedback as to how to answer that customer, what to say. And then this of course brings the question, it enhances productivity, but also it gives the issues about over surveillance. In vehicle monitoring, so putting tracking devices, for example, would be things that we are talking about. So from a data protection perspective, then if you're talking about ensuring that you comply with data protection laws, what then we are talking about, do you have a lawful basis of processing personal data? So that then employers would have to ask themselves the question, do they have the lawful basis? And one of the lawful bases that is provided for in our Data Protection Act in Kenya is consent. And I think it's also GDPR, under GDPR, and I'm imagining under the data protection laws across East Africa, that have you gotten consent from the employee to process data? But from an employment perspective, we always say, it's always understood that consent is a problematic lawful basis to rely from processing data, because it can be withdrawn at any time, and also the unequal bargaining power of an employer versus an employee. Therefore, questions are rising as to whether consent is freely given in that setting, and therefore looking at when you're onboarding employees, when you're issuing your contracts of employment, if you're putting consent as the only lawful basis, then you'd be, as an employer, you'd have a problem, because it can be withdrawn at any time. And therefore you have to look at other lawful bases that you're doing it, you're processing data on an AI platform because you are performing a contract that is a lawful basis that is set out in our laws and even GDPR, compliance with a legal obligation. So it could be a legal obligation that you have to pay salaries. So from a payroll perspective, if you're using AI to automate some payroll functions, then you have to pay salary. So it could be a legal obligation of the issue of vital interest, public interest, legitimate interest. I think that would be important to consider to navigate the challenge of how are you complying with data protection laws. Automated decision making is a key concept from a data protection perspective, because I think from many laws, including our own, is that automated decision making is not from an AI would be the one playing that role of automated decision making, that it should not happen without human intervention. It should not happen without human intervention because of inherent bias, discrimination. I think earlier on, before we started, one of the presenters here was talking about, I think a university that is automatically or using an automated decision making in admitting students, and therefore, and certain patterns are emerging where a certain gender is being sort of like, it looks like it's being favored over the other. So some inherent, some systemic bias or discrimination could come from automatic decision making, and that would apply in the workspace as well. That if it's performance management, if it's recruiting, for example, there could be biases that occur, and therefore that should be something that you bear in mind. And then what are the legal standards for employers to then bear in mind when, from a data protection perspective? Transparency, such that you don't hear, I was reading something funny when I saw someone saying that soon we will hear employees being told, good morning, sir, your employer is an algorithm. So the person really managing your employment and many processes is an algorithm on an AI platform, and that's why the need for transparency as a data protection principle to be complied with by issuing privacy notices to employees that really explain the use of AI, not only from a perspective of the HR processes that are being used, but also from, for example, generative AI, how they use it, and so on and so forth. So transparency and information sharing is important, and I think that is tied or coupled up with duty to inform, and also mitigating a discriminatory impact by having, what we were calling data protection by design and by default, so that when right at the outset you have designing or using these AI platforms in a manner that would avoid or mitigate these risks, and also providing an avenue for challenge in the event that there's an automatic decision making. A few examples that have happened in other jurisdictions, not necessarily in Kenya. There's this case that has been widely circulating the recent past of Deliveroo case, where a rider rating app was based on an explained AI, and this was challenged before their data protection regulator, and the platform provider was then fined for failing to provide information. So this brings issues to do with transparency and whose data is it? Whose data is it that is placed in the platform? Is it the employee's data or the worker, or whatever description you would choose in your jurisdiction, or is it the platform provider? And also another example is Foodino in Italy, where their regulator found that this platform provider failed to take technological and organizational measures to ensure performance algorithms were not causing or exposing the users to discrimination. And there was a fine. Look at how huge the fine was, 2.6 million euros. So it's not, as Patson was saying, that sometimes in Africa, in this region of the world, we look like that is 10, 15 years, but it's really happening already. I know from where I sit, like we're already advising clients about AI use from the recruitment space. Recently, we're advising a client who is fully automating the recruitment process, such that an applicant would go through the entire recruitment process until towards the end, and this would entail sometimes them being prompted to give videos from without human intervention at that point, and then the human intervention will come towards the end. This is already happening. It's not something that will come later. And therefore, how do you deal with this? One of the things is to ensure that you conduct a DPIA, data protection impact assessment, as required by various laws, and the DPI are usually required when, of course, the risk is very high under the various laws. And some of the risky examples of risky scenarios: profiling, that is automated decision making that I've talked about; processing sensitive personal data as defined in our laws, health data that has to do with race, family, and so on and so forth; biometric data, tracking devices, electronic surveillance, and so on and so forth. So I think that I'll just try to rush through that in the interest of time. And then I'll just mention, like, for example, what is happening in other jurisdictions, so that as employers, then you know how it is, what are these implications and how to deal with it. Like, for example, from an ILO perspective, there is this code that they issued. They make it very clear that this code is not, binding, but it's good for guidance. And they say that when employers are using AI, then some of the things that they need to consider, for example, when you're doing polygraph tests, as to do with truth verification equipment or any other similar testing procedure, should not be used. Personality tests or similar testing procedures should be consistent with the provisions of the code. Genetic screening, because I think some employers in some parts of the world are going that level of genetic screening for one reason or the other. And also drug testing. So, what do we call AlcoBlow or whatever it is, or any other drug testing from an automated perspective. There are considerations that have been given. I think I talked about principles. I've mentioned some of them. I could just mention the others. Transparency, I've talked about that. Accountability, accuracy, purpose limitation, storage limitation. And for example, for storage limitation has to do with the platform that is collecting data. And normally to be a third party platform that you're using as an employer, you have to bear in mind that this data that is being collected, from a storage limitation perspective, how long are you keeping it? Are you keeping from a storage limitation requirement? You should only keep it from up to a level, up to the period that is required or necessary, up to a period that is necessary. I think some of this that Patson talked about, we talked about transparency, discrimination and bias, confidentiality concerns. Maybe I could mention that confidentiality concern from a generative AI use perspective, so that if an employees are using generative AI platforms like ChatGPT, for example, to do their work, are they posting their information that would expose clients? Because you see, this is information that someone can actually, get it from the back end, for example. So are they posting information there that could expose you to confidentiality breaches from your client's perspective? And also the other thing, like, for example, if data or content is generated from a generative AI perspective, are there issues to do with copyright and IP infringement of people's rights that would come from the generative AI platforms? The other things, I found a very interesting description when I was preparing for this training, something called AI hallucinations, where the AI tools can create content that might be inaccurate or deceptive, so that they seem to be hallucinating in a sense. And therefore, it's important to look at what it is that will come from a generative AI perspective. I've already talked about most of this, I think, were mentioned by Patson, and Patson also talked about then what does and I'm almost actually finishing. I think my 20 minutes are almost done, although I've done, I think, 15. There's an ILO survey that is out in the public domain, and I think I even saw in the social media platform, the country director for ILO in the East African region was talking about it today. I think was it yesterday in a platform in Tanzania, and she was talking about, she mentioned this in a brief that she was presenting that has been issued by the ILO itself, and this is how the survey looks like. This survey, I think, was done sometime last year, and with the movement of AI, this could even have changed. It moves in a very fast-paced environment or speed, and from that survey, ILO was noting that tasks with medium or high exposure to, that have been implicated by generative AI. And you see like clerical support workers. So I think what Patson was talking about, assistants, we are doing clerical work, seems to be the most affected, 58% exposure. Technicians, associate professionals, there's 25 professionals, yourself and myself, like in the legal profession, or I'm imagining HR practitioners could be here as well. There's 25% service manager, skilled agricultural plant, machine, craft, elementary occupations. You can see all that, the exposure that has been impacted in the world of work. But I think the survey and the conclusion in that survey is that while the impact has been huge, or the impact is expected to be huge in certain areas, there's still a lot of room for reskilling, retooling, and looking at different perspectives of how it is that AI and technological advancements can be augmented with all this growth so that there are no job losses. And so things to do with, of course, retraining employees, redeploying them, and so on and so forth. But we can't also close our eyes from the fact that there could be possible redundancies if they have not already happened. I think they have already happened, actually. I know from a legal perspective, for example, in Kenya, when we went virtual post-COVID, most legal clerks lost their jobs from a technological perspective. So we have seen that, we'll continue seeing that, but the good indication is that we will not be replaced as human beings. That may not happen, at least in our lifetime, because there will be need for augmenting the AI users in the workplace. And I think from a legal perspective as well, like for example, the data protection laws requiring the human intervention is a good thing from a labor law perspective, such that then jobs are not lost. What is happening in, as I try to wind up, what is happening in other emerging legal frameworks? In the UK, they published what they call the white paper. They have not, at least from the last time I checked, they have not come up with a specific AI statutory framework, but they published this white paper that has some overarching principles, and their approach seems to be focusing on regulators to take action in their regulatory spaces. But from the EU perspective, I'm sure we must have heard about the EU AI Act that came into force, I think some March, or was it April this year, which is said to be the world's first comprehensive legal framework on artificial intelligence. But we also have, way some years back, we had some guidelines or principles from OECD, which were adopted in May by some OECD member countries. And all these regulations talk about the things that we've really talked about here and try to project into the future transparency, as much as, like for the UK, for example, the approach is we do not want to maybe have one legislation just yet. We do not want to stifle innovation, to make innovation, yield the gains that come with, increasing work opportunities and so on and so forth, but still trying to deal with challenges that are being faced. But I know that, like in the UK, in the EU, at the regional perspective, then they have the AI Act. But more governments are issuing guidelines. They're looking at policies. For example, in April in Kenya, our own government, together with some development partners, issued a national AI strategy development process, or started that process, which emphasizes on responsible AI development, but sustainable growth. So it's an issue of a balancing act. Sustainable growth because of technological advances, but also responsible AI use at the same time. So in my conclusion, I would say that AI is already accelerating and revolutionizing the workspace, and this revolutionary acceleration is expected to continue. There will be continuous adoption of AI, and there might be possible job losses. We already had them, but there will still be, because of human intervention, there will be a possibility of more jobs being created because of the augmentation that AI will still require. Data protection laws will continue to play a very key role, and I think you will see in almost all these policy and regulatory interventions, data protection is playing a very key role in all this consideration. And it's just a call for us as stakeholders, employers, practitioners, and anyone who is affected, literally everyone is affected, to then start talking about compliance, and we are very grateful for the East African Law Society to arrange such forum, because this is the forum that then, such forums are the ones that really talk and enable capacity building and discussions and these narratives to go on in this manner. Last but not least, I'm an author. Allow me to mention that. We published from a Kenyan law perspective. It's called Kashindi's Digest of Employment and Labor Relation. Kashindi's Digest of Employment Cases, which is a collection of cases from an employment law perspective. And some of the cases we cover here are actually on data protection. If you'd like to have more insights about these 2 volumes, I'm sure you shall be free to get in touch with me through the East African Law Society. Thank you so much. I will stop there at this point. Elizabeth, I hope I didn't eat into so much of my time. I think I spent about 19 minutes. Thanks.
All right. Thank you very much, Ms. Kashindi, for that presentation. We'll just go straight into the next presentation, which touches a bit on what you've talked about. But I'd like Dr. Goodluck Temu to take us through the key legal and ethical considerations to consider while using AI in employment. Now, we've talked a bit about this, and before Mr. Temu takes over, he is an advocate of the High Court of Kenya with over 10 years experience in legal practice. He specializes in telecommunications law, competition law, regulatory law, consumer transactions law, and ICT law. And additionally, he's also an assistant lecturer at the University of Dar es Salaam School of Law. And he holds a PhD in competition and telecommunications law from Bayreuth University. Forgive me if I've mispronounced it. And holds a Bachelor of Laws and Master of Laws from University of Dar es Salaam, as well as a postgraduate diploma in legal practice from the Law School of Tanzania. Karibu, Dr. Temu.
Oh, thank you very much, Elizabeth. I hope you can hear me. And can you confirm that you can see my screen?
And no, we can see you, but we cannot see your screen.
Okay, just a minute. There?
Yes, we can see it now.
Okay, thank you very much. I suppose Irene and Patson have made my work really easy, so I'll try to be as brief as possible. And much of what I had prepared has already been covered, so I won't spend much of your time. I just want to start by asking a question. Probably in your leisure time, you might have come across this question or this suggestion that we think you would like this one. So when you're watching probably Netflix or Amazon, or you're browsing something, you will often come across something like this. We think you would like this one. And my emphasis is on the word think. And then on Netflix particularly, you will come across this because you watch this and then we recommend something. Now, when we are interacting with these programs, it is so easy for you to think that it's just natural, it makes my experience very good, which is correct. But can we take a step further and assume that at one point in time, an employee or employer AI tool come to you with this question or recommendation based on 1, 2, 3, we think you are underperforming, or based on 1, 2, 3, we think you are discriminating us or you are exploiting us. This is assuming employees also have a way of monitoring what the employer are doing. So artificial intelligence, we all know it is a computer system performing tasks that typically require human intelligence, and this is the key. These are examples that all of us we know as lawyers. What is important for me to mention at this point is that artificial intelligence is, after all, not that intelligent. So the quality of the output is determined by the quality of input data. So the more correct data we are feeding into the systems and machines, the quality of the output we are getting. Otherwise, if you feed in garbage, definitely the output is going to be the same. Now, in employment, we know that AI is already on the high rise, and so many platforms are using AI in recruitment and hiring, onboarding and talent management, generative automation, and performance and evaluation. And these ones that I have just highlighted are some of the AI tools or platforms that can assist or can interact with employers and employees at Employment or WorkPlus, if I can call it that way. There are obvious benefits, and this is where probably I would want to highlight a few things. So it is obvious, we all know that there's a question of efficiency and cost reduction. The process of making decisions is enhanced. There's improved talent acquisition and management. And if it is properly trained, there's a possibility that we can use AI to avoid bias. On the other side, however, potential biases are there. There's a question of privacy concerns, legal and ethical implication. And of course, the most important, in my opinion, is lack of that human factor in the process of making decisions. Now, to the center of my presentation, what are the primary legal challenges? Number one, we have already spoken about this one. There's a question of discrimination and bias. So as I said at the beginning, the quality of what you get out of AI depends on what you have fed in there. If you have fed the system with bad data, for example, there's no way that you can get a good output. And that is why the AI tools have to be customized to meet specific needs of a, say, specific organization or specific society, etc., etc. For big organizations like, say, Amazon, they have tailor-made AI tools that can help them to, let's say, evaluate how their employees are performing, tools that can monitor how things are taking place at their workplace, etc., etc. So the quality of output will be determined by the amount of data. Now, we all know AI works basically by collecting data from the internet. So it downloads almost everything that is available on the internet, and then you train it to give you specific responses based on specific patterns. The question is, what is there? For example, there's always a question about North and South debate. If, for example, the World Bank is looking for a certain expert, and there are two CVs, one from, I will use my university, University of Dar es Salaam, and another one from, let's say, Harvard University. If these two CVs are subjected to AI tool, most likely the AI will recommend someone from Harvard. Because if you go through the internet, Harvard is better than University of Dar es Salaam, which is to a certain extent correct. But it could be that the role requires someone who has certain experiences beyond being at the Harvard. And therefore, the discrimination will be obvious, and there will be potential biases based on what is available. The same, of course, can be seen, for example, based on what the internet tells us, which are the best universities, and therefore CVs of persons who have been to certain universities, for example, the Boston League, are likely to be favored in place of someone who comes from, say, somewhere around the world. I shouldn't mention countries here. There's a question of cultural perspectives. If these are factored in, they might lead into bias. Number two, this has already been spoken by both Patson and Irene. There's a question of privacy concerns. You see, for the AI tool to work better, you need to feed it correct information. And this may amount into taking personal data and to some extent sensitive personal data. Now, the question is, to what extent are the employees willing to share those personal data? To what extent are they willing to be surveilled and monitored? But even more important is that some of these platforms are open in the sense that they take data from users and they make those data available to other users. So for example, if you interact with ChatGPT and you go to their privacy policy, they will say the question that you ask it and the information that you feed in its system will be used for further training. So they will use your data, and somehow you might end up, your data might end up somewhere that you really never wanted them to end up there. So there's a privacy concern. And then there's a liability issue. Say you have entered into a contract and AI has assisted the employer to make certain decisions. Who is going to be liable for those decisions? And if we can flip the coin, one can also ask, suppose an employee opts to use AI in performing certain tasks, and there are some errors or omissions in that performance. Who is going to be liable? Do we have policies at workplace that address how we can use AI to deliver our duties and responsibilities? If that is correct, to what extent can we use AI? There's a question of contractual status and obligation. So we have now possibilities of onboarding, evaluation, performance, and even promotion by using AI. Now, the question here is, when I signed the contract, was I aware that I am going to be subjected to AI? Is it fair, for example, under the current contract, to be subjected to evaluation by artificial intelligence? So in my opinion, I think if you dig deeper, there could be some contractual questions as to who are the parties here and what role does artificial intelligence play? Does it replace the employer? Does it support? Does it complement the employer? What exactly does it do here? I think this is one of the most important legal questions that has to be addressed. And here I pointed that, can one really delegate contractual responsibilities to AI? So if there are no regulations, one can assume that it is possible for one to be recruited by an AI tool or platform. You get onboarded using AI tool, you get your job description using AI, you perform using AI, and you can even be terminated. Now, how do we take care of that? In order to address that, there has been certain efforts to regulate how AI is used at the workplace. Now, many laws, labor laws, do not specifically address the artificial intelligence question. However, laws related to discrimination and specifically data protection are most relevant. So in many jurisdictions, you wouldn't come across a specific legislation that addresses artificial intelligence, but what artificial intelligence does and the potential effects are likely to be covered to a certain extent by data protection laws. So if you go to the European Union, for example, they have the GDPR that to some extent address the question of artificial intelligence in relation to data protection. But there's Artificial Intelligence Act that provide a regulatory framework. And this is I would say, the first act of its kind, because it provides different layers of protection. So to some extent, there are practices that are outright prohibited. Some are categorized as high risk, and therefore there are specific mechanisms to deal with them. Others are categorized as lower risk, but still there are frameworks to safeguard how they are put into practice. So if one wants to understand how best can artificial intelligence be regulated, the Artificial Intelligence Act of the European Union is the most relevant framework or literature for reference. And this tells us one thing: we shouldn't fear, we shouldn't be skeptical about artificial intelligence. Yes, it is coming. Yes, it has its repercussion, but it is here to stay. So the best way we can see, we have to do, is to see how better we can proceed with artificial intelligence legally and ethically. In Tanzania, we do not have a specific law that addresses artificial intelligence, but if you go through Personal Data Protection Act of 2022, there are provisions that may take care of that. There's an establishment of Personal Data Protection Commission that is given overall mandate. to regulate, to protect data in the country. There's requirement to register data collectors and processors. And then the collected data, there's a regulation of how one can use, store, and dispose collected and processed data. But the most important provision, probably in my opinion, is on the regulation of export of data. So for you to export data collected in Tanzania, say to someone who is outside Tanzania, you need to get a special permission. And this is important because this big tech company always wants to mine data from African countries, from developing countries, obviously honestly from almost everywhere. But it's cheaper to get such data from African countries because also we do lack in terms of data processing and storage. So this now provides a protection. So these artificial intelligence, for example, OpenAI, all these giants, Alexa, Amazon, Google, etc., they will have to, special procedures have to be followed before they can get data from Tanzania. Now, there's a question of bias in artificial intelligence, and I have two pictures to show you here. This is the first picture, and I used the same prompt to get this other picture. The prompt was very simple: draw a picture of an African student in a classroom, and then draw a picture of a European student in a classroom. And this is what artificial intelligence gave me. So in the African picture here, you can see we have a kid here. For some reasons that are not clear to me, he's looking at probably the camera because all other persons are looking elsewhere, or maybe he has lost focus. I do not know. You can see the nature of the classroom here. It is obvious dirty. You can see the nature of these desks. And then we go to the European side. The kid is somehow attentive. You can see the desks are nice and clean. There's even a teacher here. See the walls very well decorated. And I can even tell that the room is spacious and airy. Now, the question is this a true presentation of an African kid in a classroom? I leave it to you, but maybe it is true. Maybe this is what the internet has been fed to believe, and this is the data that artificial intelligence platforms do have. And therefore, they cannot think that there's a first-class school somewhere in Nairobi or at Dar es Salaam or Kigali that has the same setting as a school that is probably somewhere in London. I use the same thing to say, draw me a picture of an African city and a picture of European city, and this is what we got. This is how an African city looks like based on AI, and this is a European city. You can tell the contrast here. So the African city is highly populated, no order. You can see chaos here. There are buses, there are cars, roads are not there. There are not even road signs, And then the European city, everything is in order, very few people, Maybe this is true. Maybe it is not entirely true. It's up to you, members, to tell me whether AI is correct. So what I'm trying to say here is that bias in AI comes in form of data or the algorithms used. And therefore, if we feed it with wrong data and we apply it at workplace, we have the possibility that we are going to affect some employees because they will be judged, they will be promoted, they will be terminated, they will be disciplined based on wrong data. But even more important is that AI at workplace assumes that everything can be mechanically defined. We are lawyers. You see, if somebody comes to you and say, I have got that case filed, that is a good report, and you can just tick as in the assignment is done. But for some of us who know that filing some cases might be very challenging, if this person comes to you and explains to you the effort that he or she had to go through in order to have that case filed, you may even think of promoting her or even giving him or her a tip for the work very well done. But AI cannot take that into account unless we also train the systems and machines to learn of that, which is, from my point of view, very difficult. So there are certain mitigation strategies. I don't want to spend a lot of time here. I think someone will speak about this, but we need to have a diverse and representative data sets and regular audits of AI system. This is very important. Ethical implication, again, surveillance concerns. Does AI know me? You see, so how much do we, how much do the machines around us know? You see, if you give your data to your television and to your fridge and to your computer and to your mobile phone, how much is there about you? Do you, at certain point in time, either mistakenly or knowingly, you have probably given permission to this system to know almost everything about you. Sometimes some of us, we don't know, we go to places, we go to Facebook, we check in, you tag, locations, etc. All of these, you give information to these systems. Now, at workplace, how much are you willing to give? You see, can your work experience, can your performance be subjected to AI so that your employer get the right output to measure maybe your performance or to promote you, etc., etc. There's a question of data sharing, the extent of customization for better results. So the more you want to get appropriate AI results for your employees, you need to give it correct amount of data. But how much are you willing to go? You see, because it may not be enough to say this person has a university degree, but maybe you have to specify from when, you need to specify where does this person come from. You probably need to share his or her hobbies, etc. So how much can we go in order to perfect AI? And what are the implications that come with that process? There's a question of consent. What type of consent is needed? How frequently? But even more important is, if I've given my consent today, can I withdraw it? And if I withdraw it, will my information, will my data be withdrawn? And if it is withdrawn from the application that my employer used, is it also withdrawn from all other applications or softwares or platforms that had access to the software or program that my employer used? So this is, it's a serious thing. You see that the right to be forgotten and whatnot, it needs to be taken into account here. But there's a question of fairness in decision. How fair are the AI, is the artificial intelligence? How, in other words, how do we account for efforts that cannot be easily recorded? But even more important is, can we trust AI? Is it reliable? In other words, if we permit it to replace what employers or employees can do, we are trying to say that we trust and we rely on it to determine our future. The question is, are we ready? Can we do that? And what are the implications? Now, the most important thing that we have to note here is that when you improve interactions at workplace, you also build organizational culture, you also transfer skills from one person to another. So if everything is automated and is replaced by artificial intelligence, will we even have organization culture? Will we be in need of transferring skills from one person to another person? This is probably one thing that we also, one of the important things that we need to take into account. So the transparency, this will be taken care by another person. An employee needs to consent to, and the employer need to respect that concept. That is very, very important. And I cannot overemphasize that transparent communication is very important. So what can we say? Number one, AI is just that, it is artificial. There's a fear that AI will replace human beings. I don't think so, because they're artificial. These are machines, they depend on what we feed on them, and therefore they will always remain to be artificial. And as a result of that, human supervision and regulation are indispensable. If you want to get the best out of AI, we have to improve supervision and regulation. We'll need laws that tell us how to use AI. I would like to say that AI does not replace humans. It may replace certain tasks. do them instead of human beings, but at no point in time, human beings will disappear in place of AI. And therefore, we need to view AI as something that complements what we can do and not something that takes away what we were meant to do. That is, in my humble opinion. So the best way to think of AI is AI plus human being results into efficient, quick, and better results. Thank you very much.
All right, thank you very much, Dr. Temu, for that very informative discussion. Thank you for bringing up the important issues with regards to bias, the issue of liability in case there's something wrong that happens because of a decision that's made through AI, who is liable, and taking us through the Tanzanian legal regime as well, and highlighting the AI Act in the EU, and as well the importance of integrating human beings in supervising AI. Now, to wrap up today's discussion, of course, we've seen that data protection is basically at the forefront, or at the most important issue that we are discussing today. So we'll have Ms. Budoni Njogu to take us through just a few aspects on data protection. And in terms of introduction, Ms. Njogu is the managing partner and head of commercial and corporate law at Njogu and Associates Advocates. Her practice areas include corporate and commercial law, civil and commercial litigation, dispute resolution, public procurement, technology, media and telecommunications, IP, and legal audits. And she holds an LLB from Moi University and a postgraduate diploma in law from Kenya School of Law, as well as an MBA in strategic management from the United States International University. Ms. Njogu brings in a wealth of experience from the public and private sector, where she has previously served. And also she has vast experience in advising legal commercial entities in Kenya with regards to banking and IT, and as well as manufacturing industries. Additionally, she's a certified mediator from the Mediation Training Institute, a chartered arbitrator from the Chartered Institute of Arbitrators, a commissioner of oaths, and a notary public. Now, lastly, she's also a deeply passionate in emerging technologies, which includes the Internet of Things, artificial intelligence, blockchain, and machine learning, and cybersecurity. And she's certified in blockchain technology from the Oxford University Said School of Business, and has attended several trainings on the same. Karibu, Ms. Njogu.
Thank you so much.
Right.
I hope you can hear me. I know I have a few internet challenges. I'm so happy because I think all the heavy lifting has been done by my fellow panelists. So I'll use what we say in litigation, that I associate myself with the submissions of my colleagues. So I will briefly touch on a few things. One of the key areas that, even if it has been touched on by other panelists, I just wanted to highlight on the consequences of non-compliance with data protection laws in the context of AI used in the workplace. So from a Kenyan perspective, the underpinnings for which I have used from a legal perspective, there are so many legal instruments. So if I look at the Europe, I'll look at the GDPR. If I look at the African perspective, I'll look at the Malabo Convention. If I look from the Kenyan perspective, I'll look from the Data Protection Act. Tanzania will follow suit and Uganda will follow suit with their own respective data protection acts. So from a Kenyan perspective, if we do not comply with data protection from a perspective of AI, one of the key things first before I start off is the understanding that AI is beget on a lot of data sets. You need a lot of data sets for AI to work. And I think Goodlike has touched on that as well. So in this data set is the interplay between algorithms and the data sets. But it is said that the more privacy stringent that you are, the more or less the data that you have to actually feed the AI. But at the heart of it and soul of it is the fact that there are consequences if you do use somebody's data set. And what has been highlighted before in terms of the work environment, that if you do use somebody's data set, for instance, in recruitment processes and etc., then what happens from a legal perspective in matters non-compliance? So from Kenyan perspective, we have enforcement notices that are issued by our own Data Protection Commissioner. Also from a GDPR perspective, we also have consequences in terms of fines that are attended to it. We have seen this especially in large organizations, IT organizations like Meta, where we have seen big and large fines being issued by various data protection authorities from Ireland, from Europe, etc. And as well, as well, when we also talk about how can employers ensure matters compliance with data protection laws when deploying AI. Again, these are other issues that have already been touched on by my previous panelists. What I didn't hear, and maybe I just want to highlight, aside from having, we are having clear policies, having data protection impact assessments, ensuring that we uphold the rights of employees, there is a concept called an algorithmic impact assessment. So over and above having a data protection impact assessment, and I think Goodluck touched on it towards the end, we have what we call an algorithmic impact assessment. What is the work that these algorithms are undertaking, the data sets that we feed them? Of course, the concept of garbage in, garbage out. And one of the issues that has really been coming up is when organizations are undertaking algorithmic impact assessment, is when companies realize that a lot of the work that has been given to people, especially in the gig economy, to feed the data sets to the artificial intelligence machines, now humans are taking that responsibility and now opting it for AI to do the work. What am I saying? So if I've been given work as Muthoni to actually feed or train a certain AI tool for it to have the accuracy, the level of accuracy in terms of information, because the work that I get, I receive minimal pay. So I'll crowdsource it to another artificial intelligence machine, let's say ChatGPT, because I want to save on time. So we find that a lot of the data that is now found on these algorithms, ChatGPT and the likes, is not comprehensive, or it's not clear data, or there are some errors around it. And that's what Goodluck was telling us about garbage in, garbage out. So the micro worker or the gig worker will feed the algorithm on false information. So it is important that there must be something we call an algorithmic impact assessment, just to ensure that whatever has been fed to the AI is also tenable and is accurate and efficient. So lastly, I will touch on the challenges posed by the use of AI in the workplace. I think Irene had also touched around it, the perpetuation of bias and discrimination. And of course, that we have seen from many presentations before, that we can see, I think there was a case for Amazon where employees were looking for software developers, and they were not getting feedbacks because the AI had been fed wrongly. But how do we balance the use of AI and employee rights? We have all agreed that as a continent, first and foremost, we have gotten to the bandwagon of digital agendas. When we look at it from a trade perspective, from the African Continental Free Trade Area, there are elements about the digital agenda. If I come back here to my home country in Kenya, we are on what we call a digital superhighway. So these emerging technologies, artificial intelligence, and in areas like blockchain, every technology with regards to the fourth industrial revolution, it is taking us to that canon of the digital highway, where we are getting to a certain level of digitalization of so many things. Hence, there is a need and a purpose to balance that, even if there is the downside of AI, as what we've seen before in the previous presentations, then from a human and labor perspective, it is important to also see that at the end of it all, there is some good that actually makes it easier. You can be able to go through many CVs. Patson talked about it in his first presentation. There is going through a set of a trove of data set, make work easy for decision making, predictability of the business, affecting the bottom line, etc. So even with any technology, I do remember a quote by Mark Zuckerberg, who said, in the world of technology, we move fast, we break things fast. But that is not the way it's supposed to be, because at the heart and center of it all is an employee who, one, has employee rights, and two, as a consumer of all this technology, there is consumer rights as well. So how do we balance it so that we don't lose the rhythm of, we can use the technology to bring us to a certain canon, if I would call it that, but at the same time, having safeguards or mitigation elements that can help us harness or leverage this technology. So first and foremost, I think also a lot has been said, but I would want to just focus this conversation on policy and legislative, the policy and legislative level. Goodluck has also touched around it, but we are seeing a new and emergent way of now embracing the fact that we can't run away from this technology. Africa, for instance, I think we're about 11 countries that have actually come up with some form of legislation that touches around it. The UK has actually a specific code in terms of employer and employee rights that actually touches on AI and employee rights. So I believe that that is the way to go, where we are really having the touch point of employers and employees, coming up with legislation that is able to protect the employer and at the same time, the employer as a consumer. Lastly, I think Elizabeth had asked me to talk about data transfers. I think if you have in an organization that is undertaking work, let's say in the 3 East African communities, we have also been privileged to work with clients who are in the 3 East African communities. How does this shape from an AI perspective, and also how does it shape from an employee perspective and data privacy? Well, the safeguards that our Data Protection Act provides is the fact that there must be commensurate safeguards in the country where that data is traveling to. If, for instance, Goodluck has taken us through the Data Protection Act, I think of 2022, the Tanzanian ones. Can we say safely from a Kenyan perspective, even if there's some element of an AI intervention in between, that when the data gets to Tanzania, will it be safe? Will it be secure? Are there adequate safeguards when it comes to the data having crossed over to Tanzania? So from our Kenyan perspective, we always have to ensure that the data commissioner always ensures that when the data is transferred, there are commensurate data protection laws in that particular country, and of course inform the employee that your data is moving from this place to Uganda for this particular reason, and if possible to get the consent. Irene had taken us other ways of when it is possible to talk where it is lawful to process data that relates to a data subject, which could include legitimate interest, etc., or government regulations. And again, we must ensure that at the very least, we must obtain consent of the data subject. Then ensuring that there is no misuse or unintended disclosures by the recipient or whoever is getting that data, that they do not use it in a way that is not in line with the purpose for which they were given the data to. When we had, I think one of our clients had actually offices in the 3 East African countries, Uganda, Tanzania, not the rest, just the 2 of those, ensuring that there are also agreements that allow that merger between the Tanzanian office and the Ugandan office, because they were the same units, but at the same time, they had different registered legal entities, ensuring that there are safeguards with regards to agreements between the 2 organizations. So in totality, Elizabeth, because of time, I will speak the time. What would I conclude? We have made great strides from a digital perspective, and AI and all the 4th industrial revolution technologies will play a very key part. There will be the downsides, there will be the upsides about it. So at the end of it all is to ensure that even me as an employer, I have obligations to employees, even if I utilize AI for purposes of making my work more efficient, more prudent, etc. To ensure that at the end of it all, I'm doing that in accordance with the law, ensuring that if necessary, we need to undertake what the measures. We need to either have a data protection impact assessment, we need to have the algorithmic impact assessment. Policies, we are able to train our employees. This is the kind of information we'll be using, the machine that we'll be using, etc. So the clarion call is to ensure that technology is here to stay. Regulation might not follow suit at the very fast speed that we might want to, but to take the good that comes out of it. Thank you so much. I'll leave it at that, Elizabeth.
Thank you very much, Ms. Njogu. I'm just going to go straight into the questions that have been asked by the attendees. And I'd like to encourage the attendees to ask any other questions they have in the chat box before we conclude. And the first question that was asked, I think it was briefly handled, but I can just take it back to Ms. Njogu with regards to, I believe it was performance and performance monitoring and evaluation, which has been touched on by several presenters before. So the question here is with regards to the provisions of data protection. So how do we balance the employers' need to evaluate their workers or performance monitoring and the need to protect the data, especially of their workers, especially with regards to automated decisions? Maybe just 1 minute, because I believe somebody had already touched a bit on that.
So if I take the Kenyan perspective, one of the rights of the data subject is the fact that they are not going to be taken through an automated process where there is no human intervention. So that is a right within our own act. And I do believe it's also mirrored within the GDPR and other legal instruments. So how do we balance that? The fact that you have this sacrosanct right, let me call it that, if you have come across the fact that a lot of this information has been, and AI has been utilized to actually come up to a decision, it is within your right as well again to go back to that particular entity and demand that you need to see either the outcome or how the processing was done to ensure that your rights are still protected. So it is within your right not only not to have the automated process, but also to go back to the institution and ask for what we call a data subject access request right. So that you can understand how was this data processed? Was this data processed through an AI, or if not, or was there human intervention? Then you can be able to take remedial rights, like what we said. There are sanctions or consequences for not adhering to the Data Protection Act. That would be my comment.
Right. Thank you very much. The next question is posed to Mr. Patson. And Caroline Oundo asks whether, with regards to job security, since artificial intelligence is going to take all jobs, what happens to the young people who are currently struggling to go through education?
Thank you, and thank you, Karen, for the question. Of course, that question is both political as well as economic in nature. For instance, as we speak about AI taking over jobs, I think currently in Uganda, we have approximately more than 70% unemployment rate. For the people who are meant to be employed, more than 75% are unemployed because of the demographics and the economic setup. So you can imagine with the penetration of AI. But I hope that out of this discussion, we've also not come up with an impression that AI will take all the jobs. I'm almost certain that that is not possible, for a number of reasons. Yeah. So we might have increased AI penetration, being able to do a lot of tasks. But I think there are quite a number of jobs that will still require human intervention. And Elizabeth, this, connects very well with the last question you asked me about education. What's the place of AI in education? And I think beyond preparing the next generation of workers to be able to utilize AI as a tool, I believe, in my view, it's a tool to be used to enhance productivity and the workplace, not to replace human. Because there are certain things that are almost impossible. For instance, AI does not have emotional intelligence. And I think largely now I sit in a number of interviews for C jobs, and sometimes a lot of questionnaire centers around the emotional intelligence of candidates, being able to have, that jobs that still require creativity that AI won't be able to do. You still have jobs that require critical thinking. For instance, AI might be able to do your research, but they may not be able to do dispute resolution. So you have jobs, for instance, that require leadership and management. So those jobs will still be there. So for that young man in trying to nurture education or to get into the education system, or somebody trying to ensure that they're preparing those students for the next job market, leadership skills, critical thinking, teaching and mentorship, innovation and entrepreneurship. Those are matters that AI may not be able to do. And I think when you look at, for instance, in Uganda, the new curriculum is trying to adopt entrepreneurship skills, critical thinking. Students with emotional intelligence are given some rating so that what were the skills of yesterday in terms of the training won't be the skills of the next generation. Otherwise, then, if the training of the young people are based on the fact that there's no AI, then they will be affected. But if the training and the job focuses on the skills that are not replaceable by AI, those that require human touch, counseling, I'm not so sure whether AI can do, counseling that requires, emotions being understood, that requires personal touch, that requires empathy. So we still have quite a lot of sectors or jobs that still would require a human element in it. And there are those that probably AI won't be able to replace. But also the knowing that skilling and reskilling and retooling is an ongoing exercise that will remain is very important for the next generation of workforce. Yeah. Back to you, Elizabeth. Yeah.
Right, thank you very much. Yes, indeed, it is true. As the technology evolves as well, or evolves, and with regards to the evolution of data and the evolution of the legislations that we have, we also need to revolutionize our education system and include more skills that will equip our students for the workforce. Right, so our last two questions, we have a question directed to Ms. Kashindi with regards to the Kenyan Data Protection Act and Employment Act. After employee dismissal, how far can the employee go to demand for their sensitive personal data in possession of the former employer, especially if it's stored in private folders at the workplace?
Thank you, Elizabeth, and thank you, the anonymous attendee, for the question. I'm not so sure as to what the person asking means by private folders, and because it has like two connotations. If you mean personnel folders that are kept from a HR perspective, then, or do you just mean that in their machine that they were using, then they have a private folder, they were saving it? But I'll answer the question anyway in either of those two scenarios. So I think it would really depend on whether there is any justification for the employer retaining that data. But actually, maybe I should start. If, for example, it is personal information that is just saved in someone's computer and they left, and they're asking for that information to be deleted or erased after they had been dismissed, then that would fall within what Ms. Jog was talking about, that you just, submit your request for the erasure. And I think even Dr. Temu talked about the right to be forgotten, so that you're completely forgotten and there's no footprint. But if it depends on what is really if it's in personnel file, I think there must be there could be justification why it is that an employer may keep it for longer. I know the Employment Act section 10 subsection something provides that employment records should be kept for 5 years. But we have seen justifications where employers actually keeping them for much longer than 5 years because of any of those reasons that are set out, the lawful basis that are set out under the Data Protection Act. It could be a lawful basis, it could be a legitimate interest. And a very good example I'll give you is a case where, from an employment setting, I know with Section 90 of our Employment Act has 3 years as the limitation period for, in an employment claim. But there have been instances where the jurisprudence that have come, even including from our Court of Appeal, that say that claims that can go way back even over 5 years, where an employer would then have needed evidence to support themselves. So in that case, they would justify why it is that they have kept a record for more than 5 years. I've seen a case recently where the Court of Appeal, for example, said that a claim that arose in the 90s, for example, was still legitimate because of what we call in our law a continuing injury exemption. And therefore, I would imagine if a question is asked to that employer, why are you still keeping records from the late 90s? They could say, we had this case. We had to defend ourselves and we had to keep those records. So I think it boils down to whether there's a lawful basis for the employer storing that data. And remember, storing data, falls within the definition of processing data. So storage, if the employer has legitimate interest for storing the data, then the employer might refuse to, so for example, erase. But if there is no legitimate, there's no other lawful basis or any other reasons, then once a request is made for erasure, because it's a right of a data subject under our laws, then it should be erased without much pushback. That's what I would say, as far as that question is concerned. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Ms. Kashindi, for that. Now, our last question is directed to Dr. Temu. How can data processors be guided on drafting privacy protection policies?
Yeah, thank you. Thank you very much. So number one needs to know that data protection privacy policy will have to be guided by specific needs. So you wouldn't have one size that fits all. A data protection policy for my firm here in Tanzania will be different from what you have there in Kenya, Uganda, and elsewhere. But also that will be different from a firm of, say, accountants or a hospital. So number one needs to understand what exactly are we dealing with here and what is the extent of data that this person is going to collect. But the overall guiding principles will be those contained in the laws and regulation of that specific country. So for Tanzania, one will have to be minded of what the Constitution provides, plus the data protection, Personal Data Protection Act, plus relevant laws. So if it is at workplace, that will have to be the Employment Act. If it is elsewhere, it has to be the law that governs that particular profession. I understand there are countries that do not have a specific data protection laws. One also needs to be aware of what other international standards do provide. But what is important is that if you read from the European laws, from other jurisdiction, data has to be collected, collected, processed, stored for lawful object. So you don't just need to collect data because you feel like doing it. Whenever you want to collect data, the purpose has to be lawful, and it has to be for identified purpose. So you don't just collect data if you don't need it for a specific purpose. I think it must be Irene has said that it has to be for legitimate or lawful object. So you collect it for a specific purpose, you store it for a specific purpose, and when that purpose is done, it has to be collected. In Tanzanian law, you need a proof that that data has been, it has to be destroyed. And the proof will be needed that that particular data, which was collected for 1, 2, 3, 4 purposes, has now been destroyed. So we do not have a record of your data. Now, for details, I think I would advise one to go into this particular legislation for further, insights. Thank you.
Right. Thank you very much for that. Now we've come to the end of our session today. I'll just ask each of our panelists to give us like a 30 minutes sort of tidbit from everything that we've been discussing. What is your take home? What is our takeaway from today's discussion? Maybe we can start again with Dr. Temu, then go ahead to Ms. Njogu, Ms. Kashindi, and Mr. Inaitwe.
I would say, as I said when I was finalizing my presentation, artificial intelligence is here to stay. There's no way we can go against it. Much as it is here to stay, we need to find ways to work with it. It is not replacing us, but since it has been created by human beings, it means that we are more intelligent than it, and we can find a way to go around it. I think the first presenter that should be Patson said that it can't replace everything. And when things have been phased out, other things will come. Some jobs will be phased out, others will be created. It is here to stay. Let us find a way to use it legally and ethically. And the best we can do as lawyers is to advocate for proper regulation, because when it is used effectively and legally, it can do a lot. I am a beneficiary of it, and I think everyone can testify what AI can do. Thank you very much.
Yes, Ms. Njogu, you can go ahead.
I like to call myself a knowledge worker. So as a knowledge worker, it means that I need extra time, which is more than 24 hours in a day. So I am a beneficiary of artificial intelligence that helps me become more productive. And that, again, falls into what I think Temu has said, that it will never take away all the jobs. There are things that even if I try my level best to give AI to do for me, it will not do for me. Lastly, I say that just like any other emerging technology, there's always the space for us as legal practitioners to lend our voice to the policies that are being curated for purposes of the fourth industrial revolution. I've always witnessed sometimes a lack of our, can I say, oomph in terms of being providers of information when regulation is being formulated. So my clarion call is to every practitioner here, when, for instance, from a Kenyan perspective, we normally see, please make your comments on incoming regulation for certain elements of the law. Please be that proponent who gives information. Thank you.
Is it me who is next? Thanks, Elizabeth. Indeed, I just want to echo what my fellow panelists have said, that AI is here to stay. It's not going anywhere. So we must be prepared to continue being impacted by it. If there are any negative projections, then how do we deal with that? But also the positives that come with it, we must embrace them as we go along. And from an African perspective, I think there's been statistics to project that by 2035, I believe that Africa will be the continent with the largest and most youngest workforce. And I'm imagining now with the multinational corporations and other entities would be focusing on Africa. They're already doing that. And I think it's a very good space for us as practitioners in this field to get prepared for that, so that 10 years, whatever it is, I think the dynamics will be completely different, and AI will play a very big role in this projection that is coming out there. And therefore it gives us obviously opportunities as lawyers in terms of policy, informing policy, legislative changes, dispute resolution. I think for my Kenyan colleagues and even in East Africa, we must have heard, for example, the recent, I'm saying recent, it was sometime last year or early this year, there was a case on that had was involving Meta Facebook, and it had to do with I think content generation from their platform, and those entities, I mean the individuals who went to court were alleging that they had been, subjected to some content that is not, proper. And I think some of the things that were being raised was from an occupational and health and safety perspective. So very new things that we talk about, that if employees are being subjected to AI platforms, are there occupational health and safety issues? That's one of the issues that were raised in that case. So we need to broaden, I think, our understanding. We need to be open for all these things that would come, so that when such disputes come, we are able to represent them them, whether you're defending the platform providers, or whether you're representing employees, or whether you're acting for unions, and so on and so forth. And I think the lingering discussion across the world is, and especially now pointing to Africa, where maybe there are still limitations, and as far as technological use is concerned, should we wait for innovation so that it's not to go on, so it's not stifled before we do regulation, or should there be a balance such that we have regulation striking a balance together with innovation, so that there is a growth of work opportunities? I think that's my personal view, that there should be a proper balance, so that the innovation is not stifled, but also there's responsible and proper use of AI and technological advances. There's a lot of material that is now in the internet. Thank God for AI and technological advances. There's a lot of materials on this, and even from an ILO perspective, I sit in an ILO committee called Committee of Experts on Application of Conventions and Recommendations. And last year we were doing a survey, what we call a general survey, and an aspect of it had to do with what the future outlook is from a platform perspective, digital economy, and what the survey of what the outlook is in many jurisdictions, and it's something that you could look at. So these discussions are going on, and I think I shared earlier on that even the ILO has been doing a survey as to how that looks and what recommendations are being given from the world of work. And I think the focus is really on that balance, safeguarding rights, but at the same time not stifling technological advances. I think I'll stop there at this point. Thank you so much, Elizabeth, and thank you for all of you who are able to join us.
Yes, thank you, Elizabeth. First of all, we need to appreciate that the future is AI. So it's no longer about whether we can embrace it or not. I think the question has moved towards now, how best can we integrate AI at a workplace from the employment point of view? Because the benefits are enormous in terms of productivity, in terms of removing processes that were clogging the administrative system. But also, I think from the discussion, and my colleagues have brought out very well the challenges and the risks, that come with artificial intelligence. And like any other technology, especially from the continent point of view, we are moving slightly behind the rest of the world. So we have to play a catch-up game. So addressing the challenges and the risks really requires to have a multifaceted approach, so that we do not lose out on the benefits of AI. And that requires, for instance, for those who are involved in the policy making, to have proactive policies around AI, but also from the development point of view, to have ethical AI development, because we've also seen that there are ethical concerns that come with deployment of AI, but also continuously, training staff at workplaces. The discussion of AI in schools and universities cannot be, underestimated. But also now we must consider, robust data protection, because AI, as we've said, data is gold now. A lot of mining and harvesting of data comes with implementation of AI, and that has to come with robust data and privacy protection ideas. But also, cybersecurity is very critical. So it's a multifaceted approach to ensure that we harness the benefits of AI at workplaces, in education institutions, in government, in doing business, but also from the employer and employee relations. So AI is now at the center of that in employee relations, productivity, performance, and basically ensuring that bottom line is actually improved. But we must look at it from the perspective of ensuring that these challenges and risks are also taken care of. Otherwise, I will thank you, Elizabeth, for moderating us very well. And for my fellow panelists, thank you for the insightful discussions, and the East African Law Society for organizing this as well. We've all benefited.
Yes, thank you very much, Mr. Inaitwe, and to all our panelists. Thank you for the informative presentations and discussions, and even taking your time to take us through this very broad area. And I'm sure in future we'll have more discussions, which we'll call upon you to come and take us through as well. And for all the attendees, we thank you again once more for joining us for staying with us throughout the entire session. And we encourage you as well to keep on joining or coming for the other capacity building sessions that are hosted by the ALS Society. And yes, thank you very much. And I hope to see you next time. Have a nice evening.